morning and welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I am Sam Sprunger, and I am joined by Inside the Hoosier Mind, Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, how are you this fine morning?
I'm doing good. I've probably had a little bit better week than you. I mean, your Boilermakers, both football and basketball, have had it rough, and I've gotten
They quit playing football in September, so I don't even
right, and I got roasted on TikTok by 300 very salty Alabama Crimson Tide fans.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, but yeah, it's been a little bit of a rough day. We're going to talk or rough week. As you can hear, I'm probably a little nasally. I have got a cold. God bless the winter time or the winterish weather, to where I'm. Well, that and I have kids that bring things home, and since I work from home, my immune system has gone down to basically nothing.
Yep.
So I've got to always be preemptive, and anytime they bring something in, I normally get it. So, but we're going to talk a lot about the Big Ten basketball season. A lot of the teams have, if they haven't already, they're getting ready to start their Big Ten season. But a good portion of the teams have gotten at least one game in because the Big Ten a few years ago switched to where they play a couple of games and then go back to out of conference. So by the end of the 2024 calendar year, each team will have a couple of Big Ten games in the books, and then they'll play a couple of games before they get into full swing. But first, we're going to talk about football. We've got a Big Ten championship pair up, and everybody had it. Oregon and Penn State.
Yep.
And that is coming hot off the heels from last week. Let's jump into the game as it's called, and of course they put the in all caps. No,
Of course.
Anyways, but 6-5 at Michigan, now 7-5. Michigan stuns number 2 Ohio State 13-10 at the Horseshoe. Really, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on what people thought about Ohio State's performance, and they honestly think that maybe even Ryan Day got duped into playing right into Michigan's hand, with Jerome Moore saying, running it up the middle. They can't run it up the middle. And Ryan Day'd say, I'll show you we can run it up the middle. And then they couldn't. But Tony, what are your thoughts on what happened in Columbus on Saturday?
It was funny. I saw a photo that somebody posted that apparently Jim Harbaugh has officially broke Ryan Day post-COVID because he's now 1-4 against Michigan, but he's 47-1 against the rest of the Big Ten. And on my personal TikTok, I put up a poll saying, do people believe that Ryan Day should be fired? And it was 80% yes, 20% no. And this was a combination of both Buckeyes fans. I'd probably say about 60% Buckeyes fans and about 40% not Buckeye fans. Yeah, saying, yeah, he needs to be fired. Now, of course, there's a lot of Michigan fans defending Ryan Day, saying, no, keep him there because it's another win for us. But I will agree with Colin Cowherd when he said this is probably the worst state in Ohio State's history within the last 10 to 15 years, because you came into this almost 29-point favorite.
I believe it was a 24 by the time, because I think at the start of it, I think it had winnowed down to about 24, 25 maybe at one point.
So we'll say for sure you're at minimum a 3-touchdown favorite to win,
at least a 4-score favorite,
and you end up losing when you had multiple chances there in that last quarter to potentially pull it out. With Jack Sawyer got that pick right there at the end zone. I'm like, well, this is Ohio State's chance. This is their drive where they go down. Either they kick the field goal or they run it in for a touchdown. And that's their statement of, no, we are back. We have this rivalry back. And they absolutely
had 2 missed field goals and 2 interceptions in the end zone.
Yep. So they left what,
That's
6 points?
That's a 17-point victory if they cash in on all those.
Yeah. And that's with Will Howard. And can I ask you your opinion on this?
You're going to talk about
real quick, too?
Syracuse, aren't you?
No. Because all honesty, I'm like, Kyle McCord led them to what, 9-3? Very cool. I mean, yeah,
but he also threw for 6 touchdowns or accounted for 6 touchdowns against Miami the day that Ohio State still got beat by Michigan.
True.
And last year, many people said if we had a better quarterback, we would have beaten Michigan. Well, you have the better quarterback, and if you're not watching, you can hear my air quotes. You have the better quarterback, and you still got beat.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you really think Will Howard is the better quarterback? Because that's all I've heard from the color commentators all year. Oh, he's been in big moments. I still pose the same question. And he folded
this week.
And I still pose the same question. If that was the case, why did Kansas State let him go into the portal? No, true, it is money, but do you really think Kansas State wouldn't have been like, man, we got to find a way. We'll find a way.
I'll sell my children for you to stay here. Like if he was
right.
Honestly, you're right. If he was, and it's not that, K-State is not a horrible program.
No.
And with a great quarterback in there, but you've got to understand, and I know you do, but I'm not trying to mansplain this, but you got to understand the NIL world is a completely different world than what we were dealing with 5 years ago.
Right.
To where A, it's easier to transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And B, phone calls can be made and said, look, we can give you a lot of money.
Yeah,
we can give you a lot of money if you'll come to Ohio State and play. So I think the fact that Ohio State's payroll is over $20 million, I'm sure K-State's not even close to that.
No.
And so I think it's one of those that he was okay with moving on, and but honestly, I didn't want to bring up Kyle McCord just to drop, but it's true. I mean, he was the reason why they lost against. They needed a better quarterback.
Yep, because he was throwing picks to Michigan's defense.
And what did Will Howard do? He threw 2 interceptions. Exactly. So I would not be shocked. And Dalton and I talked about this before the end of his run, a couple of weeks before I asked the question, what happens if Ryan Day loses to Michigan, then makes a run to the national championship and wins it?
That's what I was going to say. To me, that's his only way his job is saved.
I don't know that he's safe, though.
Well, I
really don't know.
Well, here would be my argument. So, as it stands right now, before with the current college football playoff bracket as it stands right now, they would host number 9 Tennessee. So if they can beat Tennessee, okay, they beat a pretty decent Tennessee team. They beat an SEC team. Now you have Oregon versus Ohio State part 2, and it's in a neutral field. So then if they can beat that, now you're in the semifinals. So now you have to face one of the 3 state teams coming out of the other bracket. So you have to face one of the 3 that comes out of Boise State, Penn State, or Arizona State. And if you can do that, you're at least in the national title game. And I think that alone, he's going to come in next year on the hot seat. I think if he stays, if they don't fire him, it's like you have one more chance, and if you lose, you are absolutely done.
I would totally not hold it past Ohio State to win the national championship and tell Ryan Day, see you later.
Really?
I honestly would not, because you know what? I've talked to so many fans that said, all you got to do is beat Michigan. That's the only thing they want. They want the rest,
right?
But the only thing they have to have is a win against Michigan. If you can't beat Michigan, get out. And I'm like, really? So if they win, because we've talked about this before. Last time you were on, when it was a triumvirate, when Dalton, you and I were on there, we talked about, which way do you go to line up your program? Do you line up to beat Michigan, or do you line up to win the national championship? Because those are 2 different skis going in 2 different directions.
Right.
And you don't win the national championship necessarily by beating Michigan.
Right.
By gearing up to beat Michigan.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. And so which way do you want to go? Do you want him to gear up to beat Michigan, or do you want him to gear? He literally was 6 inches away from beating Georgia in the semifinals a couple of years back, and they would have won the national championship, but he had lost to Michigan.
Yep. But here, and obviously, because you live in Ohio currently, and I used to live in Ohio, and I even still have Ohio State fans that I work with at work.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody who knows and especially follows the Big Ten, that's probably the absolute most hated rivalry in probably all of college football is Michigan versus Ohio State. I truly think if, say, they go on a run and win the national title, that can pacify some of it. Don't get it twisted. That's still going to be their number one priority, that, look, you have to beat Michigan. But I also think for some Ohio State fans, if they can win the national title, that can at least give them the, hey, we did what you guys did last year. We're the national champs. And if anything, that could potentially give them more fuel for next year's game of, okay, we won the national title. Now we're defending. Now we have to beat Michigan. And so I think if he can win the national title, that pacifies a lot of that.
I'm not at all saying that I don't think you could be right if that happened. Now, here's the other caveat. I don't think they're winning the national title.
No.
But my whole point is if they would, it very well could get him at least to next season. But he better beat Michigan, and if he doesn't and he wins the national title, I think he the door hits him where the good Lord split him. But I honestly, if you were to go back, how crazy would that be? Back-to-back national champion, and he gets fired. But still not my point. The one thing that I just keep coming back to is, like, which way do you want him to go? Those are two different gears and two different directions that you gear your team up for, and it's a really difficult. Now, they completely underachieved in this game. Mm-hmm. There is no way Michigan should have even been within. It should not have been tied at the half, and it certainly shouldn't have been 13-10 a final score. That all said, I still think they're one of the top 5 teams in the country. I really do. Because 100%. You know what? We've talked about rivalry games are really weird, and things can happen where the underdog hangs around. Yeah, the underdog beat them this year. But, like, we understand that rivalries are really a weird thing. So I still think Ohio State's one of the top 5 teams in the country, though.
Yeah. And I will say, for a personal standpoint, kind of backtracking a little bit on what you said as far as, do you want him to win a national title or do you want him to beat Michigan? If it was up to me, I want you to win a national title.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate bragging right over everybody, because that means you beat pretty much everybody else except for one team, and you won the trophy of them all at the end of the year. Yes.
I'm raising my hand.
I was like,
now for me as a Purdue fan, just beat your rival, because there ain't no way you're winning the national title.
True. But like you said, though,
but you can't even score against your rival this year. So
true. But like you said, though, I mean, this is a team that they're still one of the top teams in the country as it stands right now.
Absolutely.
So for Ohio State,
that in any way.
Yeah. So for Ohio State, really, I mean, like you said, do you want him to beat Michigan or do you want him to win the national title? For me, if you can win the national title multiple times, while yes, you want to beat your rival, if it's like, yeah, we lost to you, but if we win the Natty, we're still the best team in college football, and you still have bragging rights for at least a year.
You're not wrong, but you also aren't an Ohio State fan that has crazy, stupid expectations sometimes either. And I'm not saying Ohio State fans are stupid.
No,
I said their expectations are crazy, stupid sometimes.
And hey, we've talked about
cross my words, folks.
And we've talked about that with Ryan Day's overall record. Like, he needs to be fired. Say, as a Purdue fan, would you kill for him to be your head coach? I would 47-1.
I'm left-handed. I'm left-handed, and I'd give my left arm for that.
So, no,
an 11-1 season every year, but lose to your rival. Okay,
yeah,
because that means now in the world that we're in now, you're making the playoff every single season.
I say, how many fan bases, man, your worst season as a head coach is 10-2. Oh my God, that's awful.
let's talk about the who. Let's talk about something that you and I kind of texted back and forth this week. A program that had never won 10 games in a season.
Yeah.
IU.
Yep.
You know, before this year, do you think they'd take Ryan Day at 11-1, but losing to Purdue every year? Yeah, they would.
Oh, 100%.
Every day of the week and twice on Sunday they would.
Yep.
But the one thing that we were talking about, and I still there are actually, let's put a pin in that and let's cover just we want to lightly talk about a couple of the games, other games of importance. Minnesota beats Wisconsin 24-7. Wasn't even close. It was 21-0 before Wisconsin even put points on the board. And Wisconsin's 5-7. First time in 24 seasons or 23 seasons that they are not over 500. They will not be going bowling this year. Tony, this was a kind of a surprise to me.
It was a huge surprise because I mean, and I mean, we talked about it of, you know, if this happens, you know, what happens to Luke Fickell as a result of it? Because Wisconsin had the longest streak at 23. Oklahoma State was shortly after them with, I believe, 18. Both of them had their streak broken. Oklahoma State's long broken, but Wisconsin, you know, recently, you know, do you think that this is the end of Luke Fickell in Wisconsin? Because I mean,
I could see it because honestly, I'm looking at these, and Minnesota is not the epitome of defensive awesomeness in the Big Ten. They're just not. That's not damning Minnesota for what they are. They're 7-5 with a 5-4 record in the Big Ten. They had a great season. They overachieved, in my opinion.
Correct.
But Braden Locke threw for 130 yards. He was 15 of 32. He did have a touchdown, but they only ran for 36 yards. That's not Wisconsin football.
Especially when you look at all the great running backs that have come out of Wisconsin over the years.
I will say, though, I think it absolutely depends if they're bought into Luke Fickell. Because I'm sure Luke Fickell does not, to me, epitomize what Wisconsin had been the last 2 decades of Big Ten football. They're, you know, they play at Wisconsin and they shove the ball down your throat with some sort of a stud running back over and over and over and over again. That's why Ron Dane is the all-time leading rusher in NCAA history. You know, that's why.
Yep.
You know, that's why Melvin Gordon was a stud. That's why Jonathan Taylor is a stud. Like, there are so many Wisconsin running backs that are studs that went into the, you know, that were great running backs at the college level. This does not reek of that historically. But if you've bought into Luke Fickell, you should probably give him more than 2 seasons.
But here's my question, though, because let's look back a little bit at their season. So all the way up until they faced Northwestern, they were sitting there at 5-2. So I mean, they were sitting really pretty. They lost all 5 games after that to Penn State, which, I mean, let's be realistic. In the Big Ten, for who Penn State is, they got beat pretty badly. They got blown out by Iowa.
Which blows my mind.
They keep Oregon in check, of all teams,
and
believe it or not.
By a fake field goal or something.
They get blown out by Nebraska, and then they get blown out by Minnesota.
And so, there are a couple of bad losses in there. The Iowa one, getting blown out by Iowa, and getting blown out by Nebraska. Those are the only 2 that I would really be shocked.
Right. But I mean,
apologies. Whew.
No, you're good. And I mean, the only other bad one after that was, you know, obviously the game where they hosted Alabama. They lost 42-10. Technically, if you want to call USC, because they actually had a tremendous lead on USC and ended up blowing it, but that was in Los Angeles, and that was when USC was ranked number 13.
I would still call that a bad loss because they had the big lead that they had.
I agree. So
this was definitely a subpar Wisconsin season, obviously, because it was their first losing season since basically 2001. I think it was the last time that Wisconsin had a non-winning record.
Yep.
Or a non-500 record. I guess they've probably been 500 or better for the better part of 2023 seasons. But still, I still think Luke Fickell's in year 2, or it just finished up year 2. He still has a lot of not his kids there, not his players there. By year 3, you were about 90, probably 85% all yours. You should start seeing some
growth and some development.
What you envision your program, but I honestly, but with the win now mentality, I honestly I could see Wisconsin deciding in a couple of it would have to be pretty darn soon.
Well, and
they're gonna get rid of him.
Well, and I want your perspective on it, because when I look at Wisconsin, I don't see anything that they do well. It's not the Wisconsin of old where it's like, okay, yeah, they're going to run the ball down your throat, but they also have an extremely nasty defense that will absolutely
It'd be one thing if we
you.
saw, an Iowa style team right now, where we're like, okay, it's not the normal Wisconsin can put 40 points on the board, but they're going to keep you to no more than 10 for a year, and then all of a sudden you start. No, you're absolutely right. This year was one of those. Last year they were okay.
Yeah. But I mean, you also had Braylon Allen last year, so you had a lot of cover up for that rushing attack.
You had a lot of stuff from Paul Chryst coming back. But now you're starting to get the undercarriage of what Paul Chryst had, and it's not necessarily the great, and and Fickell's not able to bring it in right yet. But if he's also trying to transform what they're trying to do. But you're right, there's not a thing right now that I could say Wisconsin's really good at that.
Right. I say that, and let's give them a little bit of credit. Their main quarterback that they had at the beginning of the season got hurt against Alabama, and he's been basically gone for the entirety of the year. But yeah, I mean, they don't run the ball well. Their defense isn't exactly, a stifling one. They don't throw the ball very well, and I mean, if they're good on special teams doesn't do enough to save them, honestly. So yeah, that would also potentially be my other big thing is, Luke Fickell comes in because they want a new identity from the Paul Chryst era, but what identity is even Luke Fickell trying to establish? Because we haven't seen anything.
Yeah, there's not anything that's really glaringly apparent. I think they probably give him one more year at least to, hey, you need to show us something this year or you're done.
Right.
We can't have 2 straight years of not going to a bowl game or having a winning record or be in contention for at least the top the playoff. We need that. You have to show us that, or door can hit you.
Right.
The other game that we wanted to just brush upon, it was a 44-7 final, so it wasn't like it was a game of anything that really mattered. Number 4 Penn State beats Maryland 44-7. The issue, and the reason why I wanted to even bring this up is James Franklin near the end of the game throws for a touchdown, a meaningless basically touchdown. The game was already over. Him and Mike Locksley had a few words at midfield. Locksley not very happy that Franklin was throwing the ball, and Franklin said, "If that's what you want to think, you go ahead, think it." He just kept repeating himself. He did talk in the presser saying, "Look, I had my 3s and 4s in there." And for them to get a chance to play a game, I'm not going to take the chance away from them to get better at what they do and to be able to throw the ball. And, that adage of if you don't want it to happen, how about you stop it? Probably popped up a couple of different times. Tony, what are your thoughts on that exact situation?
I mean, that's exactly my thought. And let's be realistic for Maryland too. Mike Locksley can't sit here and say that all of his starters were in there at that time of the game either, because even looking at the statistics, I mean, the starting quarterback for Maryland wasn't even in. It was the backup guy who had a majority of the reps. So I mean, if you're upset because Penn State's 3 and 4s are better than your 2s and 3s, I mean,
recruit better, mister.
That's something you got to work on. And I know we've talked about it. You're in Maryland. It's traditionally a basketball school. They're not really a football powerhouse. I think they got kind of the benefit of, you had Talia Tungavailoa come there, who was a big name, and he was able to attract some star power just via name alone because of his cousin Tua. But I mean, that's something that you have to work on. And even if it's something as simple as coaching, and I'll say this, and I know it's probably a pretty dramatic, comparison, but it seems that we have at least one every college football season as far as kind of a Cinderella story of, no, you don't necessarily have to have all the 5 stars and all the biggest recruits. You just have to be able to coach well, and your guys have to be able to execute well on the field. Look at TCU back in 2022, when they faced Georgia for the national title. They're like, man, TCU's on an absolute Cinderella story. They didn't show up that week. And they didn't show up against Kansas State to lose the Big 12 championship either. But, I mean, that's a Cinderella story because they got there. Look at IU this year. I mean, IU doesn't recruit well. They don't have 5 and 4 stars just sitting out there absolutely everywhere. So, I mean, if you didn't want Penn State to stop it, then you either needed to have a conversation with your defensive coordinator, or you needed to call the plays, or you needed to put the right personnel out there to stop them. I mean, at the end of the day, that is what it is. And let's be realistic too. You were, before that touchdown, you were already losing 38-7. Mm-hmm. What does it matter? You've already been blown out. It's not changing anything, even if you stop them. Like, oh, we stopped them. We only lost by 31 points. You still got the crap kicked out of you. I don't know what else you want to call that.
Yeah, I have no issue with James Franklin. It wasn't like they were hurrying up.
No,
you're snapping the ball. You're dropping back to pass. You're throwing the ball. Stop them. I mean, I know it's easier said than done, especially with, in this situation. But simply put, stop them. Then you have nothing to worry about, and then you can say, try it again. We'll stop, whatever. But it's an interesting way to end. A question for you? We talked about the Big Ten championship game is tomorrow at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. The Oregon Ducks, number 1 against the number, I believe 3 Penn State, Nittany Lions. How do you think Penn State feels about this? Because they literally were looking like, oh, look, we can beat Maryland. We'll have a little bit of a break to get healthy, a little bit of a break to, maybe go home for a couple of days, then come back rejuvenated and ready to get ready for the playoff, because we're going to host a playoff game. And now they have to play in the Big Ten championship because Ohio State couldn't just beat Michigan.
Right. I mean, I think they're excited because, I mean,
sure.
Because if you think about it, but
they have to put themselves in a different gear now because they'd already backed into like a lower gear and we're just kind of cruising.
Well, I'm going to say this, and it might be a little bit of a controversial take. I think this is James Franklin's prove it game of if you can go in. I'm not saying he's going to beat Oregon, but if you can at least keep it close, or if you can just still say, hey, you know what? Yes, we struggle against Michigan. We struggle against Ohio State, but look what we did. We took down the number 1 team in the country to win our conference.
Do you think and I don't think it's out of the realm of impossibility. I just don't think it's going to happen. But do you think if Penn State wins that, they jump Oregon and Oregon has to go play a first-round game?
Supposedly. And of course, we may dive into this a little bit later.
Don't say the committee, because you know what? I trust nothing that they say. Nothing.
I know, right?
Period. Like I will have to check the newspaper the next day after they release the brackets. That's right. That's how much I trust them. Go ahead. Sorry.
But anyway, I do think it's possible. But again, knowing the committee, they would just pull some ridiculousness of, well, they
drop Oregon out of the playoffs and put Alabama back in there. Or keep Alabama in there. That's what's going to happen. This is so stupid. It really is. There is no reason a 3-loss Alabama team belongs in this tournament at this point. I do not. They're not playing better than South Carolina. South Carolina, while they did lose to Alabama, they didn't lose to Vandy. Alabama did. South Carolina didn't go to Norman and lose by 3 touchdowns. Alabama did. Mm-hmm. This is so stupid that Alabama is in this playoff at this moment, and there's only one scenario in my mind that kicks Alabama out, and the guy that's on the stinking committee has even said if Clemson wins, we could see a situation where SMU drops out. No, they're 4th right now. There's no reason SMU should not still be in that. They should not be punished for losing a conference championship. And the committee's even said it, that you will not be punished for a loss, but you could be beneficial. It could be beneficial to win. You're talking out both sides of your mouth if SMU loses that and you kick them out of that tournament. Period.
Well, not only that, but I mean, realistically, that sentence from them doesn't make sense. Oh, you won't be punished, but it could be beneficial if you win. So what you're saying is you'll be punished if you lose. Because if Penn State wins, are they moving up?
Well, but my point is they should not, like, right now, going into championship week, this is the tournament.
Right.
If any of these guys that are playing lose, they still stay in the tournament.
Right.
But if they win, they could be bumped up. Now, it's not to say you won't go down if you lose, but you're staying in the tournament.
Yep. You want me?
How is that? How are you saying that and then saying, well, there are a couple of scenarios that if SMU loses, that they could
be out.
They could be out. They're 4th,
and that'd only be their second loss.
Getting beat by Clemson, who isn't hamster vomit. They're not a bad team. So they lose to them. You're going to tell me that they go down below a 3-loss Alabama team who lost to Vandy and Oklahoma.
So I can tell you, because I can read all 300 plus comments that I got of Alabama hate from my TikTok. To quote them, roll Tide, quit crying, roll Tide, roll MFT. But so here's the other thing that I made so many arguments to Bama fans, and of course all I heard was the wins. They beat Georgia. So did Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is also looking from the outside in.
They lost to Vandy. Give me that's the equivalent of beating, like, okay, you didn't lose to Vandy, you didn't beat Georgia, you beat Missouri. Woo!
So
Good
here
for you. So
here is what really aggravates me is
Sorry to yell at you.
No, you're okay. It's not. I know it's not at me. It's at Bama. I know it is. So let's take the hypothetical situation of SMU versus Clemson for the ACC championship, and let's say Clemson wins. That means Clemson would be the 12 seed because they would be the last conference in as far as that goes.
But they get the automatic bid for the ACC.
Correct. But that would put SMU having 2 losses, and for them to potentially drop out, their 2 losses at the time was a number 9 BYU. And what are they, 13 right now? Clemson?
Yeah.
So you mean to tell me you have 2 top 15 losses? And no, those aren't
those
nearly
are
as
much
good
worse than Vandy and Oklahoma.
Well, no, they're not as good as a win against Georgia. They beat Georgia.
I don't care.
Georgia
wins isn't matter. As good as they were either.
They beat 4 top 25 teams.
I don't care. They're not
the wins.
I know this is evidence from your Bama fan.
Yes.
This is not your grandpa's Alabama. I'm sorry. They're not as good as what Nick Saban's Bama teams were in the past. They're just not.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like, oh, we're still the great. No, you don't. And Caleb DeBoer may be great in the future, but he's lost 3 games this year. He does not deserve to be in that playoff. Period.
And I'll say this, and of course, no other Bama fan, no Bama fan truly wants to admit this, but every other college football fan that heard this argument 1,000% agreed. If this was any other team in the country that did not have that stupid Crimson A on it, if you had lost to an unranked Vandy by 5 points, and then you got the brakes beat off of you, in Norman, Oklahoma, from
by
a
a
team
terrible Oklahoma team this year.
that their freshman quarterback ran all over you for 120 yards, and you lost by 3 touchdowns, and you had 3 losses overall, this wouldn't be a conversation. They wouldn't even be considered in the playoffs if it wasn't for the fact that their name is the University of Alabama.
You just mentioned Ole Miss beat Georgia too.
Yeah.
They're not being considered, and they've got 3 losses.
Well, because they lost to LSU, Kentucky, and Florida. You mean the same Florida team that also beat LSU that until their quarterback got hurt, kept it close against Georgia?
And here's the thing. All 3 of those teams they lost to. They're better than Vandy and Oklahoma.
Yeah. 100%.
No offense
100%.
to Vanderbilt. They had a great season this year in their terms. They're still not as good as any of those teams that you just mentioned that beat Ole Miss. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
And for South Carolina, they blew out a number 10 Texas A&M. They beat a number 24 Mizzou, and then they just beat the number 12 team in the country who is competing for the ACC championship in Clemson.
Now, don't get me wrong. Clemson walked backwards into that because Kyle McCord went off in the Carrier Dome and beat Miami.
100%.
Not the point. Not the point.
Right.
And of course, if Miami had just won the game, we wouldn't be even having this conversation about Alabama.
Freaking Miami. You won job.
But at the point, but the fact that question was even asked means they've been talking about the scenarios to keep Alabama in it, no matter who wins on Saturday. Period. Yep. And this is terrible. It is terrible for the game of football to make your first 12-team playoff have this take place. Because you know darn well, and you know what, Alabama could win 2 games in the tournament, and I would still say they don't belong there.
Oh yeah, because guess who their very first opponent is? Because I mean, they have to get the easiest pitch out of the first round.
Go Golden Domers if it happens.
Right.
And I will openly root for Notre Dame if they get paired against Alabama in this tournament.
As of right now, that's where
I might even buy a damn shirt, Tony. That's how how mad I am about this.
But I'll say this too, and I know we actually talked about this a couple of years ago when they were talking about potentially letting Alabama in with 2 losses when it was a 4-team playoff and every other team only had 1 loss. This is 1,000%. College football all but has those W's from the WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment, of, yeah, you have 3 losses. Yes, for college football-wise, would it be more entertaining to see Notre Dame versus Miami?
Yes.
From the fan perspective, yes. But for them, because they want money and they want brand recognition, it's more financially and monetarily convenient for them to just put in Alabama because, everybody wants to see Alabama.
Anybody but Alabama doesn't want to see Alabama in there with 3 losses, period. And it's not even because they're scared.
Apparently you're scared of the Tide.
They don't deserve to be there.
You're scared of the Tide. You're just scared.
You lost to Vanderbilt, and that's like losing to Northwestern. Hell, it's like losing to Purdue this year.
But we beat Georgia. Roll Tide.
Woo! Big deal. Purdue almost beat Illinois.
And we stomped a bad LSU team. Roll Tide.
Yeah. Anyway,
we have the head-to-head over South Carolina.
We didn't talk much about the Big Ten championship game. We've got a couple of minutes. Let's talk about that real quick. Get me all. I got to lower my blood pressure. It's Friday morning, and I'm already hyped up. Haven't even had my coffee yet, and I'm already this wired.
I'll tag Big Talk in my TikTok post, and you can enjoy the Alabama fan banter.
Well, I'm not on TikToks.
Oh, we can get you there. Don't worry, we can get you there.
So this weekend, tomorrow, from Lucas Oil, we've got Penn State and Oregon. Number 1, number 3, probably the matchup of the weekend if you go by rankings. As much as I like, both these teams are in.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that might be up in the air, and it's like we talked about a little bit ago, is if Penn State were to pull it off, would they jump up and knock Oregon back to the round of playing right away, and they get the bye instead? That's the only thing that I could see. Oregon wins, they're going to be the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
Penn State wins, Oregon still may be the number 1 seed. I don't know.
I think by the rules, they would almost have to, because then Penn State is the Big Ten champion, and they're still going to be a top 3 team no matter what. So they would automatically get a bye. So I think no matter what, if Penn State does, that happens, and then Oregon would have to play in the first round.
You'd think so. They're also talking about putting Alabama in.
Heck, they might have Alabama win the SEC, and they're not.
No,
even
they
in the
may be
SEC
like,
title
oh,
game.
hey, what? Oregon got beat? Alabama's the 1 seed.
You know they would. First ever 1 seed of a 12-team format that didn't win their conference championship,
And a 3-loss team.
and 3 losses, of course. Roll Tide.
No, I think Oregon is. They have the tendency, and we talked about this last week a little bit. I don't think that they're playing down or struggle necessarily. There just are some teams that, maybe they weren't playing at the top of their game, and the other team, you're always getting the best from your opponent.
Yeah.
And so, well, from your good opponents, you're
Right.
getting their best. And so it's one of those that even though they only beat Wisconsin by 3 points, and they only beat Idaho State or Idaho, whoever it was Idaho State,
Idaho State, yeah.
by 10 the first week. I think Oregon's the best team in the country. They're not head and shoulders above the best team, but I think they're the best team in the country right now. And I don't know that the historically underachieving Penn State, James Franklin-led Nittany Lions are going to have enough. I don't think that Penn State's a bad team. I just don't think they have enough firepower to beat Oregon.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to take it kind of a little step further. I don't think Penn State, this roster this year, is truly battle tested.
No, the only game they really played was Ohio State, and they lost it.
So
they played poorly.
And we talked about it last week. You look how poorly they played against USC, where they had to fight to come back. Bowling Green, Minnesota. So I mean, they have struggled.
They lucked out against Minnesota. They won by 1 point.
So to me, they've struggled more of teams that are, quote, below their level than Oregon has. So to me, all honesty, this is Oregon's game to lose.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There are a couple of scenarios I could see Penn State winning, but I just don't. They're not like, oh yeah, they're right. No, I just don't. Now, I've been way wrong before, and trust me, been way wrong before, but I just don't. This is one of those that it's clarity. Oregon's the best team in the Big Ten and the best team in the country. They just are right now.
Yeah. I do want to point out a real quick fun fact. Is it not cool that every Power 4 conference championship has a new team that wasn't in the conference last year and a team that was in the conference the year before are all playing each other?
Isn't it?
I feel like that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. It is. You've got SMU and Clemson in the ACC. You have Oregon and Penn State in the Big Ten. You have Texas and Georgia in the SEC, and you have Iowa State and Arizona State in the Big 12. So yeah, it's a pretty impressive. With all this conglomeration, some of these new teams aren't.
They're doing better than expected. Yeah,
they're not struggling
coming into a new
right
conference
out of the gates. So yeah, pretty impressive. Be excited to see how things play out there. Let's move over to the hardwood for the last few minutes of the episode this week, Tony, as we get going into like I said, most Big Ten teams will have a game in. As of right now, there are only 3 teams that don't have a Big Ten game. 4 teams that don't have a Big Ten game played in right yet. That's Illinois, Nebraska, IU, and Rutgers are all 0-0 in the conference. All the rest have played one game before the end of the weekend. Those 4 teams will have their first game in, and then as well playing a second game. What is your looking at? We haven't talked much about basketball, period, up to this point. But we have. Let's see here. I'm looking at overall. The worst team right now is USC at 5-4. Minnesota's at 6-4. The rest are at least 5-3 or better. A lot of teams with 1 and 2 losses, and then you have Oregon, number 12, 9-0 right now. What are your thoughts, Mister? What surprises you? I guess.
Honestly, I think Oregon, because after they beat Alabama just earlier this week, they skyrocketed up. And then honestly, Wisconsin, I'm not going to say Wisconsin was a surprise, because let's be honest. Wisconsin the last couple of years has been one of those teams that they have been sneakily good. It just seemed like they haven't been able to finish and really put it together. But it seems like this year they are clicking on all cylinders as far as being able to make it work. And, now they got upset by Michigan just a couple nights ago on a, last second 3-pointer. But I mean, overall, they've kind of exceeded my expectations. And shout out to Michigan State too. I mean, Michigan State, they had a close loss to number 1 Kansas last month, and then they ended up losing to Memphis as well just before Thanksgiving. But they beat number 12 North Carolina in overtime last Wednesday. So I mean, they're doing pretty well so far, sitting there at 7-2 overall.
Well, I want to talk about the one team for the good that I've seen that really surprised me is Maryland. If you remember last year, they really struggled at the end during the conference season, but now they're sitting at 8-1. They just thumped Ohio State. And
50
Ohio State
points
was,
by half.
Yeah, it was 50-17 at the half. Maryland was up by 33 at the half, and so it was. But they. I really think Kevin Willard is a good coach. I've really always liked him since he was at Seton Hall, and I thought this was just an absolute home run hire for Maryland when they got him to come to College Park, and it was, but they underachieved last year greatly.
Yes, they did.
Like greatly. They finished it next to last in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
like they finished above Michigan, and that was it. And Michigan. They won like 2 games in the Big Ten, so it was really hard to not finish ahead of Michigan. But the fact that they're at 8-1 and really doing a good job at finishing, I think is what, and they've got a lot of good players. I think Kevin Willard's got the Terps going in the right direction. Michigan State, they've looked good at times. For the bad, now I'm going to go, and this may sound really bad. IU, for all that they had, all the anticipation that they had coming in, to get beat by 20, I think 7 against Louisville. And then the next day to get beat by Gonzaga. Now, don't get me wrong, Gonzaga is a really good team, but you know what? You got housed by Louisville, and then you at one point I saw they were down by 15 or 16 to Gonzaga. If you want to be that team, you can't have that happen. Yeah. So and I'm not kicking dirt on them, because you know what, my Boilermakers, they don't know how to hold on to the ball, and it's cost them dearly in 2 big games. They got absolutely throttled by Marquette in Milwaukee, because they couldn't hold on to the ball, and they kept turning the ball over, and they couldn't hit shots when they, if you're struggling but you're not turning the ball over, you've got an opportunity at least to hold on to get back into the game. Shots come, but if you can't hold on to the ball, you can't get out of your shooting woes.
And quick side note, that Marquette, the only team to beat Maryland, and they only beat them by 4. It was 78-74 on November 15th. So Maryland held their own pretty well against Marquette.
Marquette's pretty good too.
Yeah.
That too. But then last night Purdue loses by 11, and it wasn't even that close ladies and
No.
gentlemen. It wasn't even that close. Penn State was up by 27 at one point, but Purdue, 20 turnovers, sloppy, couldn't hold on to the ball. The refs were pretty ticky-tacky for most of the time. Ace Baldwin got called for a technical foul for barely celebrating something, and he got a technical foul. Trace Kaufman-Wren got a foul for an offensive foul by moving somebody with or maybe it was defense. I don't even remember what side of the ball he was on, but it was like basically just banging bodies together, and he got called, and it wasn't an obvious. So, whatever. I'm not making excuses. It makes it hard to get into a flow, but if you can't hold on to the ball, Purdue's got issues, and this was a thing that I talked to Dalton about when a few weeks ago, once the season tipped off, is against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, they had 17 turnovers. And I said, you know, they're still trying to feel themselves out. Now, and you and I talked about this, I don't doubt that Purdue's going to be okay. They're going to fix this, at least to make it better than what it is now. Yeah. But right now, they're not good at holding on to the ball, and it's costing them dearly against good teams.
Well, and I kind of want to ask you this, because I feel like this is a key component that has also really been a Purdue staple for the last few seasons. I mean, Purdue has always had a really, really giant big that has been able to kind of help with that, because, okay, not only can he basically just reach up and grab the ball out of midair pretty much wherever he's at, but it's kind of forced Purdue to change the style that they were used to. Because I remember watching a lot of Purdue. They're not a fast team. They're a team that is going to take their time. They're going to break you down. And now they're still going to score very proficiently, but they're not fast scoring. And I kind of wonder if, because, Zach Edey went on to the draft, the other 7-footer, the freshman or sophomore, I believe, Jacobson, he's out for the season. If Purdue isn't having to look at this and saying, okay, we're going to change our game style to something we haven't had to use for a while.
You don't know Matt Painter very well, do you?
I don't. I'm not saying, like you said, that Purdue's not going to fix it, but I do think they are going to regress a little bit, because they're having to adapt to a little bit of a different style.
You say regress, and it's literally one of those like Ryan Day losing to Michigan, and that's the one. Like,
correct.
They're going to lose more than what they have in the past, normally, and they're still going to be pretty darn good.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not saying they're going to lose like 15 games, but I think they are going to lose a couple more.
They have CJ Cox. They have Jakari Harris. They have some those two freshmen coming in. They have Jack Benter. Like, they have a lot of young, really talented ball players, but there are also guys that just went to prom last May.
Right.
That's how, or like 6 months ago, they were just graduating from high school. So like they're still very young. So and you also have, and I don't care what Ace Baldwin says. I know I applaud him for his confidence, but at the same time, he knows darn well that Braden Smith's one of the best point guards in the country.
100%.
And if given truth serum, he would know that. And
I think what happened is, because they had such a dynamic player in Edey for so long, he got covered up.
Sure.
And so this is exactly really the year where he can highlight that.
Yeah.
So
and he struggled a little bit. He only had 6 points. He had 5 or 6 assists. Ace Baldwin, 17 points, was able to, Okay, Ace Baldwin is also the defensive player of the year last year in the Big Ten. He's really, really good too.
Right.
So like this year, the basketball, I like Oregon. But I still think Maryland's my surprise good to this point. That's not to say that that's not even to say that IU can't recover from this.
Oh yeah, so we're still early in the season.
They're still trying to feel things out.
Yeah, it's
going to take time.
I think especially in the early season, and this is what I like most about basketball as compared to football, is you can have these early season kind of screw ups, and then once you can get it to click, that your season can immediately turn around and it's not completely and totally lost.
Purdue beat Alabama, so like
right.
I know they've got a good roster, but they still have to hold on to the ball.
They have to hold on to the ball. Much to your point, with a lot of the freshmen, they have to get that experience of playing in these big time, Division I type basketball games. So again, that's the beauty of basketball. These are guys that are coming out. We'll probably see a lot of the teams like Maryland, where you have a lot of that core probably coming back, and they maybe have a little bit more of the chemistry early on. Whereas you see teams like Purdue, okay, they may get off to what we'll say is probably a slower start, just because again they're having to overcome injuries and they're having to put in a lot of those young guys, which by come March time are going to be a lot more battle tested. This will probably be a 180-degree flip. We hope. We're taking about an 80% chance. We're assuming they're going to be better when it comes time for March as compared to what they are right now.
Well, it's going to be exciting to see how that goes, and that brings us to the end of this week's show. So, Tony, why don't you let everybody know how they can find us?
You can find us on Facebook at Big Talk. That is B1G Talk, not BIG, B1G Big Talk on Facebook. You can also find us on Instagram, X, and TikTok at B1G_Talk. Same thing, B1G, just put that little underscore in there, Talk. You can find us every week on the All Sports All Plays Network. Every Friday morning, you'll get to see our lovely, beautiful faces to start your day. And if you want to be able to watch us on the go, just look at your mobile app store, look at the All Sports All Plays Network. You can download that where you'll find us. And then Sam is rockstar and nice enough that he will upload this episode wherever you get your podcast at, both video and audio, as we found out a little bit earlier and discussed a little bit earlier on the Lounge Media Group later in today.
Yes, sir. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Big Talk for Tony Hollinsworth. I'm Sam Sprunger. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you later.